This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk, your go-to Iowa-based sports show, hosted by the one and only Eliot Clough.
What's up, Cedar Valley, and hello to the Hawkeye State. This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk, your Iowa-based sports show here on AM 950, KOEL, and KOEL.com. Here with Ethan Petrik from the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier. Joining us once again, my name's Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter. I'm a UNI insider for Town Square Media. So, meeting of the football, UNI football and basketball minds once again today. The Panthers, they just fell to 1-3 in basketball after that loss to Grand Canyon. And of course, the football team missed the FCS playoffs to this 2022 year. So, a frustrating last 72, 80, whatever, 96, that's the number. 96 hours for the Panthers and UNI fans. And Ethan and I are gonna break it all down here today. Ethan, of course, a beat writer for the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier covering UNI sports. So, Ethan, first of all, thanks for hopping on again. We appreciate you coming down. Much appreciated. Anyway, Ethan, you and I talked earlier this season about UNI football, and that's actually our most popular podcast. So if you missed it, that's from earlier this season after that Illinois State loss by the Panthers. That game we talked about, again, really frustrating. Third down issues were a big deal in that one. But after that game, UNI flipped the script, went 4-1, finished the season 6-2 over the last 8 games. Their only loss over that last 5 games was to number 1 South Dakota State. Ethan, with where you're at, what you're thinking right now for UNI, like what else could they have done to make the playoffs at this point? There's a list of things, but I want to see if you maybe have thought of something that the general public UNI fans or I haven't thought of.
I honestly don't think that there's much else that they could have done.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at it, and Farley knew it as soon as that field goal went through against the Jackrabbits. He talked to us. He's like, "Hey, we knew this was the one that could be a big one for us," and they didn't get it done. It felt like the entire game like they were going to pull it out, and they didn't. So I'm not sure what else you could have done without changing the results of that specific game. Even reworking the schedule, putting all 6 wins in a row, starting 0-5, I still think that they dig themselves too big a hole. And if you mix up if they don't start 0-3, you mix up those losses. I don't think reworking the schedule is going to change it if all the results stay the same. So I feel bad for him because you could feel like talking to him on Saturday after the game. Bryce and Matt Cook, they both felt like they'd done enough. They both felt like they were going to do some damage in the playoffs if they got in. Farley, he was a little bit more, he's been around a little bit longer. He kind of had an idea for, maybe this isn't going to be enough. But I still think that there was some hope in Farley that they had shown what they needed to.
Yeah, I mean, they blew the doors off South Dakota. And, if they did that to a team that had shown some level of being competitive during the season, I think that might have changed things. But, I mean, they beat SIU at home, like that. There was no way for them to get into the playoffs. If that wasn't good enough, if the near loss to South Dakota State wasn't good enough, you have to go back to the loss to North Dakota. You have to go back to the loss to Illinois State, because you win one of those games, you're probably in. If they beat South Dakota State, if that missed field goal, there's no leaping penalty, and they win in overtime, they're in the playoffs. Like there's no question about it to me.
Well, I mean, at that point, you're starting to look at and compare their resume to other resumes of teams that are at 7-4, and I think the team that fell squarely in my crosshairs is the Montana Grizzlies, being from the state of Montana. I mean, I got Montana till I die in my Twitter bio. I mean, if you were watching College Game Day, that's the big thing that the Grizz like to say. I was a Grizz fan growing up, and they had no business being in the playoff over UNI, in my opinion. I'm sure we can get into the Grizz's resume later on and how it stacks up to UNI's, but it just felt like beating down on South Dakota was going to be enough, and that was a surprise to the South Dakota fans and the writers there that I was talking to, because before the game I said, I think UNI is going to win by 3 scores, and they thought that was too big. They thought it was going to be a 1-score game, and South Dakota had a real shot, and I was like, I don't know about that.
Have you watched UNI football over the last 5 weeks? It's just one of those. But I didn't think it was going to be like it was. Like we saw, that was just, I mean, I tweeted it out. You probably saw it. I said, Theo Day, these guys have families.
Yeah.
Like, it was just absolute domination from the get-go.
Well, and I'm sure you had the exact same thought that I had, and you're sitting there thinking, hey, they needed to beat South Dakota, and they needed to beat South Dakota bad. This is exactly what they needed to do in the first half. Like, this is exactly what they needed to do if they were going to get in the playoff. And so I think that win almost set false expectations, because at that point you're like, oh, there's no way they leave them out now.
Well, I mean, like, literally just the eye test over the last however many weeks, that's a football team. That's a playoff football team. I saw some people saying on Twitter that they look like they're a top 10 team in the country. I might not go that far. I would say they obviously took number one SDSU right down to the very end. So they're competitive. Granted, that was also at home. So they could have really made some noise. I don't know that they go in, maybe they have a chance to upset like a number 8 Holy Cross who doesn't really play a whole lot of competitive teams. But, I don't know that they go in and beat like a North Dakota State in that first round that second round of the playoffs, excuse me. But they would have had a real opportunity to shock some people for sure.
I think you're selling them short a little bit. You look at the top 2 overall seeds. The committee picked Sacramento State and South Dakota State. And I went back when I was doing my season follow story that ran yesterday. They had the ball with a chance to take the lead against both of those teams in the fourth quarter of that ball game against Sacramento State. They're trailing when they get the ball. It's about the 13-minute mark of the fourth quarter is when they get an offensive possession. They get a couple first downs, end up punting it away, and Sacramento State scores a touchdown, and then Theo throws that pick to make it look way worse than it actually was. And then against South Dakota State, the game's tied. They got the ball with a minute and a half to go. You get a couple of first downs, get into field goal range, and Matthew Cook can send you to the playoffs. So I think you're selling them a little bit short. I think they could have done some serious damage in the playoffs, and that's exactly what Matt Cook and Bryce Flater both told me. They said, hey, if we get in, we're not going to disappoint. So I think that UNI would have been a very dangerous playoff team, definitely more so than the Grizzlies.
Yeah, and touche. This is the track record that I know for UNI football is they, maybe squeak in and make a little bit of noise, but, they don't necessarily go any further than that quarterfinal. Granted, the last time that happened, they went to South Dakota State and beat South Dakota State. That was the Will McIlvaine game where that season they lost to South Dakota State 38-7 and then went to Brookings and won, I think, like 13-10, and it was like -5 degrees. So, and maybe, maybe you're right. We'll never know. We will never know. At least not this season.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest L of the entire thing is that you're sitting there. You're like, hey, the defense clearly has things figured out.
Oh yeah.
With the way they played against South Dakota, it's like, hey, this is a defense that's got. They know what they're doing now. This is not the defense that allowed Zach Annexstead to scramble for a first down on like 3 straight third downs.
Right.
When Illinois State was in the dome. So
Bowman's he was a 3-star recruit, transfer from Iowa State. Like he's not a slouch.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, it's not like they were playing Utah Tech again. This was a Valley team that at one point was receiving votes. Like they beat Southern Illinois and were in the receiving votes category at one point this season. I think
and fell out after losing by 3 to the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, it was like South Dakota was like week 5, 6. They were receiving votes. They played South Dakota State tough.
I had things mixed around, but that makes sense.
Yeah, they played South Dakota State tough, and so I mean, this is a team that was respected at one point by the national media, and just kind of fell out of favor because their season didn't work out. And UNI just put the boots to them.
And USD had a brutal schedule too. I mean, Montana ultimately not very good, but when you have that resume of what they've been before and you go to Missoula, there's a mental factor in there. They were a top 5 team. It's like, oh crap, are we going to be able to do anything in this game? And then they only beat them 24-7. And then UNI beats the brakes off of them and doesn't get in the playoffs, which I saw your screenshot of the box score that you put on Twitter. I was like, get them, Ethan, let's go.
Well, I mean, it's South Dakota. They were coming off of a 34-0 beat down from Kansas State. So they had gone on the road to Manhattan, Kansas, get beat down, and then they immediately go up to Missoula to play a top 5 team in the FCS, and they play them fairly tough. And I think that was probably the first time that the Montana offense got exposed a little bit, because that's not a playoff offense. And I think that's the biggest problem that I have with it is you look at what they did against outside of Sacramento State, who kind of just quits playing defense after they get a big lead. That was the only top 25 team that Montana managed to get over 250 yards against during that three-game losing streak that they were on. And then they go out and lay a giant goose egg in their rivalry matchup, the game you expect them to get up for, right before the playoff selection. I'm like, you leave that sour taste in the mouth of the committee, and they still put you in. It's and then give you a home game.
Yeah. Granted, bids, money has a huge factor into that. And Montana, if there's an FCS school that does have investment from the fans and including money, that's one of them. But yeah, get absolutely slaughtered by a rival school with College game day there, and they still put you in. And like, the thing about that to me is, I saw this from people on Twitter, fans on Twitter, saying, why are you treating Montana like they're historically a powerhouse and giving them this roster spot, or this playoff spot rather, and not doing the same thing for UNI, who is historically a very good program, and in the Missouri Valley Football Conference, and putting 3 teams from the SEC of the FCS in the playoffs is an absolute travesty.
Well, it's a low since 2018.
It's insane.
It's the fewest teams that have gotten in from the Valley, and I think if you're looking at it, it's like if you're Youngstown State, I think you're almost feeling even more gypped than UNI, because they go out, finish 7-4, get a win against Southern Illinois to end the season, and they finish just as hot as anyone else in FCS, and they get left out as well. I mean, I'm looking at it because when Farley told me on Saturday that he thinks the Valley is a 4-bid league, I'm thinking, well. And he's like, who else is going to get in over us? And I'm like, well, Youngstown State's got a pretty nice resume too. And at that point, I was thinking, heck, 5 Valley teams isn't out of the question. And then they come in with 3, and I just was scratching my head sitting on the couch on Sunday. I just couldn't believe the committee didn't respect the Valley, but respected the CAA that much.
Yeah. The CAA, golly, dude. But and it's kind of the similar argument for Youngstown that is being made against UNI. Youngstown doesn't have a signature win. They lost 31-0 against Kentucky. They lost 27-14 to North Dakota State. They lost 35-30 to North Dakota, and they lost 25-22 to Missouri State. If they beat Missouri State, they have more of an argument. But losing to that Missouri State team this year, who UNI again absolutely throttled towards the middle of the season, I just don't know how Youngstown State squeaks in there, because their best win is probably Southern Illinois. As I have it right here, it's definitely not Duquesne, Dayton, or Western Illinois or Indiana State, and they barely beat Indiana State. They beat Western Illinois by 1. But record, I hear you at the same time, and they ended hot too.
And that's where you kind of see where Farley's coming from, like who's getting in over us.
Right.
The eye test is going to put UNI in over a Youngstown State, but still, neither of those teams made it in. So we shouldn't waste our breath comparing those two. It's really, and I'm sitting here thinking about UC Davis too. They had a really nice season, and they're in the same conference as Montana, and Montana gets in. If you can't tell, I'm really upset about this Montana pick.
Yeah, and I mean, to boot, clearly the committee has shown over and over and over again that strength of schedule does not matter, because you look at some of UNI has took it down to the wire in almost all of their losses. They lost to the number 1 team and the number 2 team in the country narrowly. Mm-hmm. How do you not factor that in? How is that not taken into consideration? And I mean, if my problem here is more so, it's with both. It's with the committee and essentially with David Harris, who I like very much. I've talked with David quite a few times. He's a great guy. He's joined me for my radio show when I was in college doing nothing on Clough and Q Sports Talk. Again, you're listening to Cornstalks and Sports Talk, by the way, here on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com. Me, Eliot Clough, UNI insider, talking with UNI beat writer from the Waterloo, Cedar Falls Courier, Ethan Petrik. Why continue to schedule these crazy difficult games that you don't have to when you can throw another Utah Tech onto the schedule, when you can throw another cupcake on the schedule, move to 7-4, 8-3, what have you, and basically get a playoff bid because you have more wins despite the lack of difficulty on the schedule. And you have a difficult schedule because you play in the Missouri Valley Football Conference, and you're going to play an FBS team every year, at least one.
You're zeroing in on the Air Force game here. Is that what you're talking about, the Air Force game that you and I played?
More so Sacramento State.
Okay,
which that's a conference thing, but which I understand. But I guess I suppose the Air Force game too. Yeah.
Well, at this point, you're kind of hoping that eventually, the stars align and you get like a Northern Colorado out of the Big Sky MVFC challenge. But the Air Force game, that's the one that you can control.
Right.
And you're looking, it's like, man, I don't even think getting rid of the Air Force game is the biggest problem with this schedule. I think the biggest problem is getting North Dakota week 2. Because if you get a Utah Tech week 2 and you have a cupcake to get back into covering passes again. That's one of the things that Farley said that they needed to do. If you can get the Trailblazers in week 2, I think this season's completely different, and I think that's one of the biggest issues. And I identified it before the season started. I asked Farley. I said, "Hey, you get North Dakota week 2. This is a really early start to your conference schedule, one of the earliest in your tenure. What do you prefer to have an early start to your conference schedule?" And he said, "Oh, I don't. It's not going to matter." Well, I think it mattered significantly. Looking at it, because
North Dakota's a good football team, but you play a Utah Tech, and that gives you an opportunity to not worry so much about the triple option you prepared for 3 months for.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is, we heard a lot of that from Coach Farley this season.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is you look at that North Dakota game, and it's not even like UNI played bad. Matt Cook hits a field goal in his second game with a new his third long snapper and his second holder, as Farley likes to let us know. And it's a win, and that's a win against a playoff team, and UNI's probably in. And so you're just looking at it like this was a playoff team, and it just didn't work out. Schedule was a disaster for them. Special teams, just getting that figured out early in the season was a tough break for them. And then just getting the number 2 team in the country week 3 to finish off a 3-game losing streak. It's brutal. If they get Sacramento State, the same week that they played not Illinois State, but they get them later in the season, I think that they fare better against the Hornets.
We're talking with Ethan Petrik from the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk this morning, Saturday morning. And my name's Eliot Clough, UNI insider for Town Square Media. We're going to head to break. We're going to come back, talk a little bit more UNI football as the season has ended, our thoughts there. And then stick around because we're talking UNI basketball. Their season just started. They dropped to 1-3, 0-3 against D1 competition. Stay right here on AM 950, KOEL and KOEL.com for more Cornstalks and Sports Talk.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Okay, we're going to go right back to it.
All right.
Because this is a podcast, this is for YouTube. We're just going to hop right back in. And we're back here on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com with me, Eliot Clough, UNI insider for Town Square Media. You can find me on Twitter. It's at Eliot Clough. We're joined by Ethan Petrik today on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com, talking UNI football and basketball as UNI snubbed from the FCS playoffs. And UNI basketball struggling to start the season 1-3. Again, Ethan Petrik, UNI beat writer from the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, on with us. You can follow him on Twitter. It's at Ethan_Petrik. So we're going to end up going a little bit longer than I presumed, and we're going to get all 3 segments in on Saturday's show for sure. That's definitely what I want to do. But with talking a little bit about UNI football, and missing the FCS playoffs, there's one player that I don't think we have even mentioned his name so far, and we're a full segment in, and that's Theo Day.
You got him in once.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about it. But Theo Day, who, I mean, you weren't around at all for football season last year, were you?
Well, no, I was still in Nebraska.
Right, okay. this is a completely different football player than we saw last season. You throw in the offensive coordinator switch, the completely different system. That's his, I think, third or fourth offensive coordinator in 3 or 4 years. And you throw in the fact that he's been around, been on campus, been able to get a little more comfortable with teammates, learn guys' tendencies, but also adding in, some unfamiliar faces in like Desmond Hudson and switching things up a little bit on the offensive line, no longer having Trevor Penning. Theo Day, if he's not the best quarterback in the FCS, I'm going to hand that to Lindsey Scott or to Cedar Sanders from Jackson State, Lindsey Scott from UIW, who was phenomenal this season. Theo Day's a top 5 quarterback in the FCS. I am just absolutely shook at what he was able to do this season. Some of the throws, I'm sitting next to you and Colbert up in the press box, and we're supposed to be unbiased journalists, and I couldn't help but be like, oh my God, and put my hands out and touch both of you guys, just like, oh my Lanta. Thoughts on Theo Day's season, man? Like, how would he not be MVFC Offensive Player of the Year?
Well, we went from quarterback controversy, quarterback battle in camp to
wow.
We're a far cry away from even anticipating a quarterback battle next year if Day's still in the building. That's where we're at. Did Theo Day play his way out of UNI?
Unfortunately,
that's probably my biggest concern. That's how impressed I was with him. And I've watched a lot of bad football and a lot of bad quarterback play being a Nebraska fan growing up. And I've never had the sort of confidence I've had watching Theo Day in that he's just going to make every throw and he's not going to make that terrible, terrible mistake. I think his worst mistake, I think he threw 4 interceptions this year, 4 or 5 interceptions. 6, okay. He threw 6 interceptions this year, but I think the one mistake he took was taking a sack on the final play against Illinois State. That's the one thing you can point to and say, yeah, that was a mistake that Theo Day made. And that's just how good he's been. That taking a sack was the worst thing he's done all season. Every game you just knew he was going to get his, and you were going to walk away with a good impression of him. So I've just been really impressed and really stunned with Theo.
3 or 4 of those interceptions off the hands of receivers. 2 from Logan Wolf, 1 from Sergio Morency. That's I know off the top of my head.
Yeah. Now that was one. Those were like all the early interceptions. Now they have a little bit more trust, a little bit more, chemistry. And I asked Coach Farley about that on Saturday. It's like, hey, Theo's thrown a touchdown pass to 9 different receivers. Is that trust in Theo with his receivers? Like, what's going on there? And he gave credit to Coach Reeder and Coach Clan and said, this is a system. They built this system around the players, and these players all trust the system. So
hot quarters, man.
It's the hot quarters. Yeah. The hottest quarter in the FCS is the Sergio Morency down the center of the
dude.
Field. That play is incredible. I thought that was going to be their leadoff play on Saturday. They ended up waiting until play number 4 for it, but it still worked out for a 62-yard gain. I going into every game, walking in from the parking lot west of the McLeod or south of the McLeod to the Unidome. I just sat there. I was like, is Theo going to get like 250 or 350 today and 4 touchdowns? So I tried to stop talking about him in my columns at the end of the year because I was like, I have just been all over this dude, and I need to pull back. It's getting a little much.
The conversation is between him and Eric Sanders. I don't know if you're familiar with the name Eric Sanders. He's the quarterback that led them to the 2005 national championship. They had that undefeated season in 2007. He was phenomenal in his time at UNI, but some of the throws that Theo makes on the run with pressure, and it's just like the thing that comes to mind, the one play that comes to mind is that throw that he made up the seam to Desmond Hudson against South Dakota State. That was the most beautiful throw I've seen probably all season.
Knowing as little as I do about Mr. Sanders, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to give the nod to Theo.
It's tough not to.
The 2005 season, they had Terrence
Feeney
and David Horn,
right,
2 running backs. No disrespect to Vance and Dom. They're great running backs, but they did not use them the same way you and I used Freeney and Horn in 2005. So I'm going to have to give the nod to Theo. And you just look at him in the pocket, the way he can manipulate the pocket with just, his footwork. He can step out of a sack. And Reeder warned us at the beginning of the year. He warned me, at least. I asked him about Theo. I was like, what do you like about him? He's like, he's sneakily athletic. I think he's faster than a lot of people give him credit for. And he could run. And he was a tough runner. Dude refused to slide. I think I saw one baseball slide out of Theo this year.
Yeah, he's a tough guy, and his awareness and willingness to run is something that, again, we didn't see last year from him. It was there a little bit, but not at the level of consistency that he did this year. And coming again, I'm comparing these two seasons because I'm just going to read you the stats right now, Ethan, and everyone listening right now. Last season, Theo Day, 155 completions for 2,316 yards and 16 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. This season, Theo Day, 210 completions for 3,121 yards, 26 touchdowns. I don't think that's factoring that last game, which would make it 31 touchdowns, right? Does that include that last game? I don't think it does.
I'll check UNI's website.
I'm on UNI's website, but either way, 26 versus 31. I'm gonna assume it's 31 because that's what happened last year. Is they didn't include the final game of the season in the statistics for whatever reason, but. Either way, completion percentage, 65% this year, 56% last year. I mean, this dude has taken such a leap and has improved so drastically. It's honestly probably one of the top stories in the FCS, just what he did. And the fact that he won co-MVFC Offensive Player of the Year one time with 2 national awards is just insane to me. And they gave it to Nick Baker after UNI beat SIU. I have a whole lot of other beef given the circumstance, but this season he also ran the ball 70 times. I'm assuming they're including situations where he was sacked, but for 223 yards of gain, 157 loss, so 66 net. Also ran for 4 touchdowns. That touchdown against South Dakota State on the option was just clutch as can be. And he was just confident doing it.
They ran that read option a couple of times.
Right.
It seems like a hot quarter when you get inside the 5 for Coach Reeder and Clanton.
Right.
So, he clearly plays with a lot of confidence right now, and I think that was what was lacking last year. Is maybe he didn't have the confidence coming in. He wasn't really secure in his surroundings yet in Cedar Falls. And when I asked him about that before the season, he said, "Oh, I'm a lot more comfortable now," and I think that comfortability in Cedar Falls allowed his confidence to grow a lot faster than maybe it did last year. And I'm guessing, we were told there was a quarterback controversy, quarterback battle. I'm doubting that there was actually one in camp. I'm sure he knew he was the guy coming in.
Well, I was told by multiple people that was the case. And eventually what happened, again, this is what I was told. It's one source. One person told me this, is that it was close, and it was probably about 60-40 Theo at one point in time. And at another point, Coach Bodie Reeder just took him to the side and said, "Look, you just calm down. Just play your game. This is you. Just play the way you know how to play." And then it was Theo's 100%. And it became very apparent that it was Theo's team, and he's really figured out a leadership role now too, which you don't necessarily need from your quarterback, but it's really freaking great to have as the leader of the offense.
I would say any great team, their quarterback's a leader. I don't think you can be successful at a super high level and not have a leader at the quarterback position. One other thing that we haven't gotten to yet, we kind of did, but he's very tough. We saw him take multiple shots in the pocket this year, just get lit up
and still make throws.
Southern Illinois gets lit up.
Oh yeah, he
fumbles the ball.
Yeah.
I asked him about it after the game. What was your mindset after that? What were you looking for on the next drive out? He said, "Oh, that play just woke me up."
Yeah.
And I was like, "You weren't already awake? You went 18 for 20 for 250 some yards in the first half." He's like, "Nope, that play woke me up." Same thing against South Dakota. Takes a big shot, nearly fumbles. They rule it an incompletion. Comes back out on the next drive, and it leads them to another field goal, and then I think leads a touchdown drive to cap it off. Or, it's all running together. Just how often Theo just dominated after you're like, oh my gosh, I would not be able to come back from that.
Right. Now, one last thing I want to get to on UNI football before we head to our third segment, talking a little UNI basketball, because we're talking Panther football right now with Ethan Petrik of the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier here on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com on Cornstalks and Sports Talk with me, UNI insider for Town Square Media, Eliot Clough. Way too early to look at next year, right? But when you consider all of the seniors that are going to be moving on, and then also in today's world, you have to factor in the transfer portal. We don't know what's going to happen, but what we do know is I've got a list of all the guys. I went through all the guys who are going to be gone this season, going into next season, rather. Offense, Quan Hampton, Deion McShane, Dom Williams, Vance McShane. So those are 4 playmakers right there. Quan Hampton lesser so towards the middle and end of the season, but your 2 starting running backs and Deion McShane, who made some great plays this season, and then 4 of your 5 starting offensive linemen: Eric Sorensen, Nick Ellis, Justin Piney, and Matthew Vanderslice. Then you look at the defense: Javon Brecky, Corby Sander, Benny Sapp. Those are 3 key defensive backs that you have. And then Spencer Cuvalier, Bryce Flater and Spencer Cuvalier been in the middle of that defense the last 4 years. Cordarius Bailey, who was there for from the transfer from Iowa State. Dylan Bowles, who was around a little bit, got some playing time, and then ended up hurt. And then you look at special teams, and you lose Damian Kermity and then 2 long snappers in Isaiah Garman and Evan Noller. So some significant losses going into this next season. You're going to have to see a lot of guys step up. Obviously, you still have Jared Penning on the offensive line. You have Tristan Roper, who's gotten a lot of time, and some other guys who have experience on the offensive line. But that's my number one concern because, the defensive backs at UNI are traditionally one of the deeper, more talented groups. And of course, they're going to get transfers at that position. They have the versatility of Edwin Dearman, who played the nickel this season, who could move back to safety. You can put one of these other guys, Penny Naulu, in that position, or maybe Dale Sean Staley steps up, DeJuan Mack steps up and fills those safety positions, and you leave Edwin Dearman at the nickel and move Cameron Baker to the linebacker and Penny Naulu to that other linebacker position. Ben Belkin, obviously, going to be in there too. But to me, the biggest concern is the offensive line. What do you think there?
Well, I mean, if you look at their recent activity in just the recruiting space, been a lot of JUCO offers being sent out on the offensive line, and a lot of JUCO offers in the secondary as well. So I mean, I think they're kind of telling you what they think about or how they feel about their those 2 rooms going forward. I think they might feel really good about them for the future. They might really like the guys that they have in the room right now, but in the very immediate future, I think that next year they're not super confident in what they have coming in next year. Just that's pure conjecture. I don't have any backing from the coaches on that. I haven't talked to anyone that said that. That's just me reading between the lines on the offers here. And so I think that they're a little concerned about what they can do to protect Theo next year and what they can do to stop the pass. And this is where a guy like Omar Brown, you're like, gee, I wish he didn't transfer and do nothing at Nebraska. But yeah,
you said it, not me.
I can say that because I'm a Nebraska fan.
Exactly.
And he did not do anything for the Huskers this year.
Sure. And also, I mean, transfer portals starting. A couple receivers offered already. You and I are both on top of that. You a little bit more than me because you pay for an app and I don't. But
hey, you could. It's $6.99.
Fair enough. But I mean, offers this morning. That transfer from Colorado State. He's the guy that could come in and compete right away. It's wide receivers who they've hit so far in the portal, which to a degree is a bit surprising to me. I don't know if there's something that they know that we don't. I mean, Peter Udoybach hit the portal as well, that transfer from Minnesota, who thought he was going to get time this year and then was moved down to the 3rd string right after camp. We don't know about DeVell Washington yet. I don't know where he's at in terms of getting back to that receiver position. Of course, Sam Schnee, of course, Desmond Hudson, anybody that I'm missing right off the top? Sergio Morency. Yeah. They're still going to have depth at that position, but I think what they want still is another speedy guy that can sort of fill that Deion McShane, Quan Hampton role, because Sam Schnee's just a guy who finds the ball, but he doesn't have quite that speed, and I'm sure they want a punt returner or maybe a punt returner in that position too.
Well, I mean, I think that if you look at it, they've used a ton of wide receivers this year. There are some teams out there that'll roll 3 guys and be perfectly fine with those 3 guys. And those guys, you'll look at the stats and it'll be like 60, 50, 40, 10, 10, 10. That's not UNI's stats. That's not how they look right now. They're using a ton of different guys. It seems like they have 6 or 7 receivers that they're perfectly fine running onto the field. And I think they want to be right back at that level next year. And right now, I don't think the roster sets up for that. You mentioned some of the guys that they have on the roster right now. One guy that I think is going to be really good next year is Grant Larkin. He's out of Illinois, Naperville. He just committed about a week ago,
and he's starting classes in the spring, so he'll have spring ball.
Yep. So I think that he has a chance to be an immediate contributor if they don't want to redshirt him and keep him around for 5 years instead of 4.
Which traditionally, that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, but I definitely think he has the potential and the ability to contribute right away. Terrence Kamara, where's he at eligibility wise?
I think he has 3 years, probably 2 years left.
So I think that's a guy that's in line for some more playing time and
special teams, sure, for sure. He returned some kicks this year.
You're just wondering where he's at, what the injury was, because we didn't see him after he got hurt against Southern Illinois.
Yep.
Never really got an update from Farley on him. So where's he at? Is he going to be able to be participating in spring ball?
He has 3 years left, too.
There you go. So I think that could be a name that pops up a little bit more next year outside of special teams. I think he could be on the field and factoring into that 7 deep at wide receiver.
Right. 9 guys on the team had 10 or more catches this season. You throw in tight ends, too. Alex Allen's back, Lane Pryor. So, and I mean, obviously Jaden Scott's moving on. But, there's some real talent still at the wide receiver position. Probably just looking to maybe fill some small gaps and still, I mean, when there's talent like that Stovall kid from Colorado State that they just offered, why not? And also that transfer from Wagner, who was the number 1 rated receiver on Pro Football Focus, why not go for it,
I mean, you're only going to help your team out by adding a guy like that.
Right.
And at the very worst, it goes the way of Miguel Edwards, and he contributes on special teams and then transfers or enters the portal halfway through the season.
To his 5th school.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ethan Petrik again on with us here this morning on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk. We're going to head to one more break, then we'll be back talking UNI basketball this morning on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com with me, Eliot Clough, UNI insider, Ethan Petrik, UNI beat writer from the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier. Don't go anywhere. We have more Corn Stalks and Sports Talk coming up.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
And we're back here on Corn Stalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com. Me, Eliot Clough, UNI insider for Town Square Media. I'm your host, Ethan Petrik from the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier. He's the UNI beat writer there, joining us this morning. And we just finished up talking a little bit about UNI football. If you missed any of that, you can always go back and listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, the KOEL app, anywhere you get your podcasts. And now we're going to hit some UNI basketball, more or less an instant reaction after their loss today against Grand Canyon in the Hall of Fame Classic. They're facing Northern Illinois on Saturday at home at 1 p.m. in the McLeod Center, another non-conference game before they head to their conference play. They'll play Bradley and Evansville before returning once again to non-conference because it's the Valley and things are weird like that. But so more or less an instant reaction to their 1-3 start, the loss to Grand Canyon, like I mentioned. When you first saw them play this season, first of all, you had the luxury of coming in when A.J. Green and Noah Carter and Austin Fife was healthy, or to a degree at least healthy, and then Trey Burhow, Tywan Pickford, all these guys were around. And now it's a young team. And I remember the first thing you told me after that Dubuque game was, I don't know, I'm not that impressed so far. Granted, it's the first game of the season. They're playing a D3 school. Where are you at now? They're 3 games into their D1 schedule, 0-3 against D1 competition. Granted, pretty solid competition. Grand Canyon, a good program. Richmond, a good program. San Francisco, a good program. Where are you at now, Ethan, in your evaluation of UNI basketball?
Well, I think if you go back all the way to when I wrote a story way back last spring after Noah left, they're exactly what I was expecting them to be. a team that definitely has the talent to be successful, but doesn't have the experience to be successful. And I think that's the biggest problem. And the play-by-play crew at CBSN, for as many Born Identity jokes as we got during the Hall of Fame Classic, did identify it against San Francisco. San Fran, they had a lot of experience on their roster, and that's probably what led the comeback and then the ultimate, ceiling of that victory.
A lot of transfers too.
Yeah. You look at their roster. I think it was sophomore, junior, grad, senior, and maybe another sophomore mixed in there. Vastly out experiencing UNI just right off the jump there. And I think that's where UNI lost that game, is the experience game. Look at it up and down the roster. I think UNI probably had a more talented team than the Dons. They just didn't have the experience. Same thing against Grand Canyon. We've seen them come out to slow starts against Dubuque. They reportedly came out to a slow start against Wisconsin in that scrimmage. Another slow start today. They fall behind by 14. Spend the entire first half trying to get back within single digits. Don't quite get there. I think it was 11-point lead for Grand Canyon.
Yeah, something like that, 12.
And then get into the second half, and they finally get it down to 5 at the under 4 media timeout. And it's like, okay, great. they're right there. Have the chance. Miss some free throws. Don't get the comeback all the way. Lose by 2 or lose by 1, 2. And so it's just, you can tell that there's an experience deficit on this team right now.
Yep.
And I don't think Austin Fyfe being available would necessarily be the cure-all there, because you're looking at it, especially this weekend, it's exacerbated by losing Nate Heisey, who's your most experienced starter with 55 starts in a UNI uniform. And you're just kind of like, hey, this team's got the talent. We see the talent. It's just the finishing isn't there because they haven't learned how to finish a game yet.
Right, and the experience factors in a lot of ways. That last play took too long.
Yep.
The free throws especially. Panthers were 4 of 11 today, 4 of 11 yesterday, 6 of 12 today. So far this season, they're 34 of 59, which is 57.6% from the stripe. That's not going to get it done, especially in these close games.
Yep.
And the front ends of 1-1, so you're not even getting the opportunity to make a second shot, make a second free throw for another added point. To me, this, again, that's exactly everything you just said. Austin Fyfe and Nate Heisey are not the cure-all, but they sure freaking help a lot. Tell you that.
Yeah, and I mean, just a calming presence.
Yep.
Even at that point, it's like, oh, hey, this guy's been here, he's done it. Pitbull, been there, done that. and
Mr. Worldwide.
Exactly. It's a calming presence because it's like, oh, this guy's been through it. He knows what to expect. I just need to kind of follow his lead. Trey Campbell, he's in his fourth college game. He doesn't really have anyone to look to and be like, oh, this guy's, he's been through it all, because the entire starting five's brand new this year.
Right.
So I look at Trey Campbell as his last 3 of the game there. Maybe a little bit of a rush shot there. Maybe we could have looked for a better opportunity. But that's a learning thing for him. He's just a freshman. He's going to learn that. And when he's a veteran in 3 years, maybe he doesn't take that shot.
And I had a little bit of conversation on Twitter about that too. Coach Jake, after the game, said he didn't hate the shot. He actually liked it.
I didn't hate the shot either. I just thought it was a little rushed.
Right. I'm right there with you. I don't hate it either when you just get that steal and you have momentum. And Coach Jake thought it was good. I thought it was good when he let it go. But he misses it, and you have an opportunity to, after getting that steal, 14 seconds left, you have an opportunity to go, all right, let's get that last shot. And you have Bowen Bourne on your team, who's a flamethrower.
I hate to bring up the experience thing again, but you probably don't have to burn as many timeouts with an experienced team as Coach Jake
that too.
did. And then when you get that steal with 14 seconds left, boom, timeout, drop a play. You get you have a 14-second window to drop the perfect play. It can be as long developing as you need it to be to get Bowen Bourne an open shot, and that probably makes the difference there. But instead, you have a team that you're kind of still trying to figure out. You got to burn a couple of timeouts early in the game because they're losing by 14.
Right.
So I think that's ultimately what these early season struggles are going to boil down to, is just a lack of experience. And so I think this could be a very dangerous team come Valley season. I just think they're going to unfortunately miss out on the great schedule that they were able to build and get an at-large bid out of, because they just can't finish games.
The really frustrating part about it, too, is they're probably going to work on this chemistry and build this chemistry and be a dangerous team come Valley time. But then you throw Austin Fyfe hopefully back into the lineup. You throw Nate Heisey back into the lineup, and those are two guys that are going to have the ball a lot. So that might mess with the chemistry a little bit. You always take getting those guys back. I'm not saying you don't want those guys back, but it's a possibility that could mess with some chemistry a little bit. Obviously, we're really hoping Austin 5 can get back. I don't know if you know him on a personal level at all, Ethan, but incredible guy. I really can't wait to hopefully see him back.
Well, I think I do not know Austin on a personal level at any degree, but I think when you look at it and you talk about bringing those guys back, that's where it's beneficial to have a guy like Coach Jake running the show, because he's been through the sort of thing where you're getting a guy back from injury. He's going to know how to work those guys back in the proper fashion, and I think it helps that Austin isn't completely away from the team right now. He's around the team. The guys know him. He's not going to be like, oh, who is this guy that's just suddenly getting 18, 20, 24 minutes all of a sudden,
right,
and stealing time away from Cole Henry, James Betts.
It's the same thing for Nate too. He's going to be around the team.
Yeah, and I think the biggest sign of where this team is at right now is the fact that Trey Campbell was on the court as late as he was. That's a freshman in his fourth game, and I think that's a situation that you probably want a Nate Heisey in the game, and you want Austin Fife down low at that point to get in position for the rebound when Trey Campbell jacks up that three, and you can get an offensive rebound and you get a second chance opportunity, which is apparently something that UNI is allergic to right now.
Yeah.
Second chance opportunity.
19 points for Grand Canyon today as opposed to just 0 for UNI.
They got 2 on
okay.
Second chance,
in the first half.
Titan got a second chance opportunity in the second half.
Sure. And Titan's been great too. I mean, double machine. These first 3 games he's gotten a double. But to add insult to injury, literally, you got 4 guys on your roster that you just pretty much can't play. Literally, you can't play Hunter Jacobson, ACL. Charlie Miller, a walk-on who's 6 feet tall and may very well have a decent career at UNI. Charlie Mamba Miller, he's a shooter. Chase Corbett, who has spent a lot of time on the bench due to injury and is just a little slow on his feet. He's still working on some of that. And then Ege Peksari, who you mentioned UNI a little allergic to second chance points. Ege Peksari a little allergic to defense. So
he's coming right after him. All right.
Hey. He'll say that. I think he'll say that himself. Ege has struggled on the defensive end. He was brought into UNI because of what he can do offensively.
Yeah.
And
the team called him out pretty hard in that impressions thing before the season.
Hunter, coach, how do I play defense, coach? That killed me. That was so funny. And this is a moment, too, where, as far as I know, they really only went after 2 guys in the portal this offseason. And that's one of those things where it's like, man, you couldn't get anybody that could come in and contribute. And Coach, that's really not Coach Jake's philosophy, is looking at the portal. He wants to develop guys, bring them up, and again, nothing against Coach Jake or against the guys on the roster, but having that level of experience and some players that have been there and done that before would help a lot right now. I
mean, the transfer portal feels like it could be super advantageous for a team like UNI where they're needing to replace a ton of production. But if you're looking at it, you're almost selling the future for the now, and I don't think that is the right philosophy at all. Because you're looking at all these young guys that are going to be in the program for another 2, 3, 4 years even. They're getting a ton of chemistry with the guys that they're going to be playing with in 2, 3, 4 years.
Right.
And so you're looking at it, it's like, man, you're taking your lumps right now, but this team is going to be a monster next year, and you're hoping that you don't lose 4 starters in one offseason again like you did this year.
Yeah.
And you get in an RJ Miller, you work him into the starting lineup eventually, and slowly you can kind of get back to where you're replacing 2 or 3 starters in offseason. You're not replacing 66% of your production. And I think the COVID year is probably what did this to UNI, where you get a couple extra years and you get recruits who want to play right away, so they're not coming to UNI. It's like, oh, you got Trey Burhow, Noah Carter, AJ Green. I'm not going to touch the court for 3 years. I don't want to play there. Well, that's not the case now, because the cupboard was basically, the cupboard wasn't bare, but it was starter bare at the end of this last offseason.
Yeah. Coming in this next season, Wes Rubin, RJ Taylor, and of course Kyle Polk coming in, and who knows, maybe all 3 of those guys could contribute next season. Obviously, really only going to be losing Austin Fife.
Well, they're all signed now, so you can ask Coach Jake.
Yes, I can. Oh, thank you. Yeah. I really appreciate that. I said that, and then it was like, I can't take it back. My face got all red. I don't know if you saw. I could feel my face get red.
I just looked down right away because I knew it was about to happen.
I was like, oh, God. Coach Jake was cool about it, though. Anyway, that is this episode of Cornstalk Sports Talk UNI special. Ethan Petrik joining us today on the show from the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier. He's a UNI beat writer. My name's Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter. Also, make sure you go follow Ethan. He and I are going to bringing you as best we can all of the UNI information on Twitter, both basketball and football. And he's at Ethan_Petrik on Twitter. Ethan, thanks so much for joining, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me down.
Hey, folks, don't forget, before you go, make sure you leave that rate and review on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube, drop a comment. What are you thinking about UNI basketball, UNI football, missing the playoffs, and UNI basketball moving forward? We appreciate you tuning in. This was another week's episode of Cornstalks and Sports Talk.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.